Mom, Dad, there's no way that I can express to you what I'm feeling right now. My heart is full to bursting, except to say, I'm the king of the world!
Hello and welcome back to Cameron, King of the World. We talked about Titanic in great depth, about the production history and the raising of the Titanic, so to speak, and how and one thing I didn't mention was that Cameron was actually quite inspired by the film from 1958, I believe, A Night to Remember, in terms of how the story of the Titanic was told on film, and even some of the dialogue. I mean, it wouldn't be a Cameron film if you hadn't lifted some things from somewhere. But he's heavily inspired by A Night to Remember. And so we've talked about all that behind the scenes, the kind of the backstage stuff and the production history. But now it's time to just talk about the film and my thoughts on it. And once again, as I've already said, me and Connie filmed an hour-long review of it a number of months ago that will be coming out at some point after this video. So you can look forward to that, and that's like a properly edited review. There's a lot of images and stuff, and I spent a lot of time on that 1 hour review. So it would be redundant for me to sit here for another hour talking about the film when you're going to hear the similar things, and you will have heard similar things from the previous installment in this Cameron King of the World series. But again, this is the film that really made Cameron the kind of superstar that he is. It's whether you can kind of look at that and go, oh, it's a bit cringy, the whole King of the World thing where he's shouting at the Oscars and everything, and then how after this really he stopped really becoming a regular filmmaker after Titanic, and he kind of changed course in his career. He became a documentarian instead, and a deep sea ocean explorer, and took the experience that he'd gained on doing the deep dive shoots for Titanic, and he transferred that over into kind of almost a career. I think he actually has a job, or is at least kind of involved with National Geographic, and we'll talk about that in later videos. But after the Titanic, he tapered off into doing more deep sea exploration and shipwreck exploration, and went back to the Titanic, and we'll talk about that in a couple of videos as well. Ghosts of the Abyss, he made a documentary about the shipwreck and going back to revisiting the kind of the haunting location of that ship. And so then it was one of those things where Titanic was such a huge hit that I think maybe Cameron could, and that's the thing, you think maybe he made so much money that he could relax for a while, but obviously apparently according to him he made no money. But it's one of those things where it just you're not going to think of James Cameron and not think of Titanic. I think it just is, it's merged with his identity now. Yeah, it's huge, so I couldn't not talk about it, So my own personal reflections of this, just for housekeeping and for the sake of this series, if anyone is watching this series and nothing else, I first saw the film when it came out, and I was 9 years old. It was released in December of 97, so I'm assuming I saw it probably in early 1998. I don't know about the UK release date, but I would assume I was home for Christmas, and that's probably when my nan took me to go see it. I went with my nan. Knowing me, it could have been Easter. I mean, the film ran for so long, it really could have been an Easter holiday in 1998 that I went to see it. And I remember quite vividly going back. So I lived in England at the time, would go home to Wales on the holidays, school holidays. Would go back to Wales at the time on holidays, school holidays, and I came back to Larkhill in Wiltshire. It's a small army garrison town, and went to school and was telling people about Titanic. I'd seen the big film and everything, and I feel like maybe it was in January because there was a big buzz in school about Titanic, and especially from all the girls. Leonardo DiCaprio was quite the heartthrob at the time for understandable reasons, and the girls were really annoyed at me that I even said that I went to see Titanic because it was rated 12, and so we weren't at the age that we could go and see it. But I went with my nan. She took me with her, and I'm assuming that's how she got me into. I'm not sure if at that time the 12 rating was negotiable, if there was any wiggle room there, like a PG-13 or something, but I went along with her and I got in just fine. And I went with a number of the women at the old people's home, which my nan worked in at the time. My nan has had many different jobs, and it's kind of almost sad to talk about my nan right now because I literally just got the news today that she's got cancer again. So it's one of those kind of hold on to your butts and cross your fingers moment where she's having surgery next week at the recording of this video in January of 2021. And yeah, but I love my nan so much, and fond memories of going to the cinema with her. And that was one of them, where she had many different jobs. She worked in the army at certain points and was a cook. Ran her own shop at one point. I think she worked at the post office. She had lots of different jobs, but in later life, she worked at an old people's home in my hometown, and she brought along a load of the old women and me to go see Titanic. She'd seen it before and really loved it, and that was something I talked about in the previous video. This is how this film made so much money. It was sharing the experience and bringing other people to, you got to come see Titanic with me because you want to experience the thrill and the spectacle and the tension and the excitement and the heartbreak and the romance. You want to experience all of that again on the big screen and share it with someone else that you care about or you love or you like. And, it's a nice communal experience in that way. So I went along to see it. And I remember one of the old women kind of leaning over to me and saying, "Oh, I bet Luke likes this." And I think it wasn't the nude scene in the film when he's drawing her. It was one of the adverts before the film ran, and I remember quite distinctly because the advert had an age rating which you don't really see on TV. It was like rated 12. And it was set, I think, in this fancy restaurant, and there was a woman inside like a tank, and she was maybe pressing her boobs up against maybe I'm like, it's a complete Mandela effect here, and I'm just inventing this, but I feel fairly certain there was this quasi-racy, advert. I have no idea what it was for. And she leaned over and was like, "I bet Luke's enjoying this." And my nan was like, "Shut up." Because the guy was like 9 years old, it's a bit... And obviously they're old, they probably don't quite understand, they're probably, it's just one of those things. So I remember that quite acutely. And my nan did tell me, I phoned her maybe a few months ago when I first went back to revisit the film for this series. Well, actually, when I first rewatched this film, this series didn't exist. I watched Titanic, I put it on, and I think I've talked about this before. I'm sorry, I apologize for retreading old ground, but it was like, wow, I want to go see Cameron's other films again and revisit those and see if they hold up as well and hold up even better like this film had. Because watching this film again was a revelation. It was just great. It was just so enjoyable to go back to it. And Connie was like, "Let's watch Titanic." I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. It's 3 hours long. That's like a big chunk of my day off, And then, all right, we'll just watch it and get out of the way. And then suddenly I'm just like, and I mentioned this in the review with Connie, obviously, but after the film had finished and the credits were rolling, I'm just like really moved by the film. And Connie's like, "Oh, it's just so touching." And I'm like, mm-hmm. And she just kept talking about how moving the ending was, and I just grabbed a pillow and put it over my face, and I was like, "Fuck you," like it was making me want to cry. I'd never really felt that. I'd always felt touched and moved, even as a kid and a teenager, by the ending of the film and the overall experience of that film emotionally. But I'd never felt like, but now I do. And it's something that once I hit 30, I just suddenly started to get more emotionally impacted by stuff, both in big scale like Titanic and smaller scale like just intimate drama films. And yeah, so I'm assuming it's just age, but it's it's a film that just held up so much more than I would have expected on a 65-inch screen, the biggest screen I've seen on at home. And the visual effects held up. You can kind of see the aging of it in some respects, but in terms of like 90s CGI, this film holds up so well. But I phoned my nan, like I said, a few months ago to say, "Oh, do you remember when we went to see Titanic?" And she said, "Oh yeah," and I was expecting her to say, "Oh, what a wonderful film," but the first thing my nan thought of when it came to Titanic was, "Oh, I just remember those scenes with the bloody engines inside the ship. It's so goddamn loud." She didn't say goddamn. My nan doesn't say goddamn. But she would have said bloody. It's so bloody loud. When the pistons of the ship, like the whomp, whomp, whomp. So in the cinema, the surround sound, she just remember it was so loud. So that was like her main takeaway, which I thought was kind of cute, that was the main thing that she thought of. And she then said, it was a great film, but that was her overriding memory, was just how booming and loud the fucking pistons of the engines of the ship were in the cinema. But it was this overall massive experience, both visually and orally and emotionally as well. I think that's why it works so well, because it is such an all-encompassing experience. So I loved it as a kid, and I got the video, and I remember it had I think it had a purple trim around the edge of the VHS case, and I was like in awe that they could fit the whole film on one video. I think there was a version where it was split over 2 tapes, and you'd have that kind of the double pack. But the one I had was definitely like a single one. It had I think the lettering on Titanic was gold, and it kind of shimmered, it just felt like a prestige premium video. It wasn't just like a normal VHS. It had a bit of class to it, just in terms of the outer packaging. And he was to be treated with respect, and I remember watching it when I was a kid in Lark Hill, and then the DVD set came out, and I think I got the DVD set and I was really excited about it because there was all these extras and discs and commentaries and deleted scenes, and I think I watched some of it and then sold it fairly soon afterwards, probably to fund one of my wrestling trips. So I kind of fell out of loving Titanic or revisiting it that often once I became maybe 16, 17. And I only went back to it, I think, in my early 20s when it was re-released in 3D in the cinemas in 2012. And that was obviously a big moment in terms of the 100th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic and the whole story. And so I went to see the film in 3D, which is a whole experience. I'll leave that story to one side because we'll just get way off track. But there was a particularly pricky man behind us and got into a bit of a row, and I sorted it out, which was rare for me. And we watched the film in 3D, and then you just kind of you let it lie, and it was just so great to come back to this film now after all these years and really love it, And so let's just talk about the film just a little bit, do a bit of housekeeping. Obviously, the story of Titanic, but just to set the stage a little bit, we open the film with this modern day wraparound of an elderly Rose, the character that Kate Winslet plays throughout the film, but in the kind of present day sequences, I'm assuming set in 1997, we have Gloria Stewart, this kind of legendary actress who had she hadn't acted for decades, I think, and she came back and just delivered a knockout performance. She just brought so much weight and hurt and regret and playfulness to this elderly Rose that it really makes the film. Like, I think it's an underrated part of the film is her performance and what she brings to it from the beginning to the end. She bookends the film with such power that the bulk of it has more weight and resonance because of how much she treats it with care and respect and real life. Like, you feel a proper character coming out of that woman in the film. And there also is kind of, it mainly begins with Bill Paxton's character, who's this kind of he's more of a pirate than anything. He's kind of like a deep sea explorer, but he's looking for this diamond, the heart of the ocean, and finds a safe on Titanic, brings it up, and there's no heart of the ocean, but there is a drawing of a woman wearing it. And Rose sees this on the TV, and she's like, well, that's me. So she gets brought over to the ship, and they take her down to see the Titanic in person, and it's all a bit, impersonal to her and a bit brash. And so she sits down and tells these young whippersnappers the story of Titanic and her experiences through her point of view, but also the point of view of a young American boy called Jack Dawson, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, who's in Southampton at the time and just happens to win a pair of tickets to Titanic, which will then take him to New York back home in a game of poker at the beginning in a bar. And so he quickly gets on board the ship. Kate Winslet's character, the young Rose, who's part of this wealthy family, and her mother are trying to hold on to the wealthy life as she's partnered with Cal, played by Billy Zane, who's this wealthy young socialite, and he has a very firm grasp over Rose, Kate Winslet. And that relationship is very problematic. He's very controlling and gets physical with her at times too. And they're engaged to be married, and this is very much an arrangement that Rose's mother is happy with because it keeps them in good standing financially. And it's more of a social play than a romantic one. And that's the way it kind of was back then, I would assume. And so you get the meeting between Rose and Jack, and she's feeling trapped and like she wants to jump off the edge of the fucking ship into the ocean, and he kind of brings her back from the brink, so to speak, and they become friends. And very quickly, the chemistry starts, the sparks start flying, and a romance ensues against the preset story of Rose going off to marry this guy Cal. And so she bucks the trend and goes off and kind of gets all lovey-dovey with Jack Dawson. And I look back on it without watching the film for many years, and I kind of see the cliche and the kind of sentimentality and the melodrama of it, and the, in some sense, the simplistic tale of, it's the rich, unattainable girl and the poor guy who has nothing to his name, but he is experienced in life, and she isn't, and he gives her something that she needs, and she gives him, I don't know, good looks. So there's not much that he gains from her in terms of experience and kind of an arc of a character to where a mindset begins to change, but he falls head over heels in love with her. And You know, what she can give him emotionally, he can also give her, but he can also give her this experience, and he can give her a new way of looking at the world and at life. And, you know, he kind of opens the door a little bit of, hey, we can go down here and you can have a life that is going to be so much more enjoyable than what you currently have, where it's going to be set and rigid, and you're not going to be very happy, and you're going to be, you know, at the beck and call. You're going to be literally underneath this man. And so that door starts to eke open wider and wider as the film progresses, until she decides to kick it down and says, I'm going with you when we get back to New York. Fuck my family, fuck my fiance, like, I want to be with you, I want to experience life, I want to do everything, you know, and I love you. And you know, it is, again, this kind of melodramatic and kind of, you know, a bit gooey and maybe maudlin, but watching the film, I get so sucked in because they're two great actors. I don't think I couldn't look at anyone I couldn't see how anyone could look at me with a straight face and say that Kate Winslet is not a good actress, or say that Leonardo DiCaprio is not a good actor. And you can say, yeah, they've won Oscars or, you know, big awards and stuff and gained critical acclaim, but in other movies, and that here they're really just, you know, it's just like a teen romance thing. But I think it's so much more than that, and I think that love at first sight stories, they're very, you know, they're very classical, you know, and there's a whimsy to it, and there's a bittersweet melancholy to it in terms of the setting and the situation. But I think that it's just I think it's one of the great romance stories I've seen in a film. I really do. It just gets more impactful to me, and you buy their chemistry, and you see footage of those two actors on the set, and they're just joking around. They're so comfortable with each other. And they're both at like the same point in their careers where they've done a few movies, and they're on the cusp of superstardom here, and they kind of share that together. And you see them now, and they're such good friends. They're so close, you know, and they have a real bond that was formed through obviously the physical and mental arduousness. Is arduousness a word? I don't know, but you know, through all the mental and physical anguish of making this movie, but also being together in those scenes and kind of forging and building that relationship, and even affecting some of the writing of that relationship. And we're not going to talk about the door because I talk about it in my review with Connie, so we'll leave that to there. But I will say, I think the whole door thing is overblown, and for me, you know, when he dies, you know, and she has to let go, and that's another thing people take the piss out of, is her saying, I'll never let go, and then she lets go of him. She doesn't mean physically. She means in terms of what he has given her. She means in terms of what he wants her to do with her life. She's never going to let go of that. She's never going to let go of the feeling that he has given her. You know, it isn't a literal thing, and I think that, you know, again, people miss that because they do maybe look at this film as more simplistic than it actually is. I think there's a bit more depth. You know, I wouldn't say that there's a huge amount of, you know, great sweeping, you know, beautiful depth to the film, but you know, there is more to it than meets the eye, I think, even though the story is laid out very simply and clearly in a lot of the kind of, you know, the politics of society and how, you know, the different classes are treated and stuff. I mean, that is very clearly defined throughout the film, of the, you know, the lower classes are down in the bowels of the ship, and the upper class are up in the top. It's you know, you think of Metropolis, you know, the wealthy live in the top of the skyscrapers, and the workers who make everything happen, they live down in the bottom, in the lower depths. And it's you know, and it's that's the way it was in the real ship, and it's you know, it's kind of a very clear way of establishing a hierarchy in a movie and in a story, and the way that, you know, the priorities change once the ship hits the iceberg, and there's only a certain amount of people who can fit in the lifeboats. That's when, you know, again, the rich versus the poor starts to really come into play, and it is, you know, it's very simply told. And I think that is a strength of the film more than a weakness. And the sentimentality, I think, for me, really kind of works. I believe the earnestness of this romance between the two. And you know, they're both incredibly attractive, young, you know, kind of leading stars, and there's just something nice about watching two beautiful people fall in love with each other. It's just enjoyable to me. But I think that they really do. There's great performances between the two, and I'd never quite given that as much credit. I think I'd always loved the spectacle of Titanic and the resonance of it, and I've always found the idea of shipwrecks really haunting. And the idea of that ship sinking really haunting. You look around, it's just a blanket of black as far as the eye can see, or dark blue, and it's, you know, can you even see the horizon line between the sky and the water, and then the cold, you know, the icebergs, and the kind of, it's just like, what a way to die, you know, it's just horrible. And a few years ago, I went to one of the museums in Washington D.C. and they had one of the life jackets from Titanic, and it's like, whew, like that's something to see in real, to kind of put your hand right next to where one of those life jackets has been, and it was dirty. I don't know if it was blood on it or whatever, but it was. And I put a picture of that jacket in the upcoming review. Again, I keep harping on about it, but there is like another video coming at some point, and I hate to cross over as much and cover the same ground, but it is what it is. And the cast in general is great. Billy Zane, I think it's a pretty thankless performance because he has to be this utter dick, but he does it so well. And again, you see footage on the filming of this on the set, and he's very, very nice and kind of fun and bouncy and stuff. And then he kicks into gear when the cameras are rolling and becomes this complete irredeemable twat. He's just such a good villain. And even down to the smaller characters like Bernard Hill, who plays the captain, who does a really great restrained performance that really works, and loads of the minor characters are even well performed, and it just gives you a really nice overall sense of all the people who were on the ship, and it just feels very lived in, and that works for the overall atmosphere. I think is that you really just buy this kind of kaleidoscope of people on the ship and how they interplay with each other, and how they stick to their own groups, and how this the ship had a lot of different people on it, and good background performances are kind of key to that, I think, to really selling the overall collective of a lot of people, a lot of extras in a big story like this. Special effects, again, hold up. They really, really do. And I talked about that in the previous video in terms of how they blended practical and the CGI and stuff. And the score is beautiful. It's just a scintillating score. It's not a word I use very often, but it really is. There's just something extra about it. And the vocalization from Sissel, the Norwegian vocalist, is just haunting. And it has that haunting quality to it, and the transitions that are so beautiful. You have, Rose as she's lying there having the drawing done, and we kind of come in on the eye, and the eye forms into the old. Is it that way? Yeah, it's not the other way around. So it zooms in on her eye as she's a young woman, and then it morphs into Gloria Stewart's eye and comes back out, and it's just a really nicely done transition. And those transitions between the present day and the retelling are so well done, and they're staggered in such a really nice way that by the time we get to the timeline of the ship hitting the iceberg, we now have a whole stretch where we never go back to the present day. It's like an hour at least, I think, or 45, 50 minutes. Like we as soon as the real drama goes down, we're fully into that, and it doesn't let up. And I think that's a really well paced device in terms of the framing it with the present day sequences. And then also when we see Gloria Stewart's face and the camera goes beyond her face to the monitor behind her, where there's the real front of the ship of the Titanic, and that morphs into I think that's when it morphs into the actual opening of the port sequence in Southampton, and it all just comes to life. And the music in that scene is so bouncy, and like we're going off on an adventure, and it just captures the majesty of that moment and the hope of that. I said in the previous video, there's a hopefulness to the film, and there is. You look at the ship that sinks, and it's just this monument to, in a sense, man's arrogance to build something this outrageous and extravagant. Of course, the ship has been, I'm assuming, bested in terms of size in the subsequent years, and bigger ships than Titanic have been made and haven't sunk like that. But boasting that it's the unsinkable ship, and this ship can never sink, and then of course the first fucking voyage it sinks. It's kind of like it's like instant karma, and kind of again like this, it is kind of a monument to man's hubris perhaps. But then also you have just this sense of melancholy that comes through in terms of everything that happened to the people, and how so much could have been done, like if more lifeboats had been on board. And although there is a whole study about how even if they had all the lifeboats they needed, they wouldn't have been able to lower them in fucking time. But either way, you just think that it didn't have to happen that way, and more lives could have been saved. There's a melancholy to that, but there is this hopefulness of also, even though it was like this big ship that they made, and they said that it can't be sunk, and it sunk, and it was tragic, and it makes you think well, I you could say that if they hadn't bragged about it, it wouldn't have happened, but that's not the case. It was going to happen the way it happened. You can't really change that by saying things differently. I don't think that's a whole realm of fate that I don't fully believe in, or really believe in at all. So, but yeah, I'm getting off track here. But yeah, so it has that kind of tragedy to it, where it's just like, oh man, it sucks. But then it has also this, wow, what a beautiful ship that was made, and just this sense of achievement and accomplishment that it was even possible to build a ship of that size back then. And I think it's a monument to man's success at the same time, that it's a marvel of engineering. So it's both at the same time. I think that's what really makes the story, and thus the film, so successful and enjoyable, is because it has the hopefulness, and it has the melancholy and the tragedy, and they're mixed together. And you open with that, and then you end with something else, and the perfect button is to have that kind of nice personal moment with Rose as she perhaps maybe passes away in her sleep, but either way imagines herself back on the ship again when her life changed forever. And that's another thing that really resonates, I think, is people who are maybe stuck in their lives, and realizing that you can change things, and you can open that door, whether it's with the help of someone else or on your own. And that's something that she really does at the end of the film, is she goes off on her own, and she does it herself, and she has a life, and she does all these things that, Jack wanted her to do, and that's a very inspiring, hopeful message too. So, you take a film where, people were kind of not criticizing, but they were pre-criticizing the film and saying like, well, why is Cameron making this film about the Titanic? We all know how it's going to end. It doesn't end, but it doesn't end well. It's going to end badly, But yeah, it ends badly. But it takes, I think, a good storyteller to find a way that feels earned, in which you have a character have this resolution that feels hopeful at the end. And that's really what Rose's character services, I think, is it leaves the film on a note of bittersweetness, of course, because she dies, or it's near the end of her life. It depends which version you believe. But that she lived a life, and that's important. And we all get to live a life, and it's what we do with it that really counts. And some of us don't go out there and get it. And right now, currently with the pandemic in the world, none of us are able to go out and get it. But you know what I mean? It's one of those things. And I think that's really what makes the film tick, is that it has those beautiful blends of emotions and feelings and messages that really work well. And so the transitions, and one other transition I love is when Jack and Rose are on the front of the ship, and they're kissing, and he's holding her, and then the camera sweeps, and then suddenly the ship merges into the shipwreck, and the scarf is just left flickering in this ghostly kind of image, and it's just a beautiful transition back to the present day. So, I mean, it's the editing, the cinematography, there's so much at play here that's just so beautiful. And that scene itself, when I'm flying Jack, that's one more thing I'll say, and I'll try and wrap this video up pretty soon, but I was worried revisiting the film that a lot of those moments that get parodied and now memed in the current kind of climate of the internet, they get memed into oblivion, is, it's been 84 years, and I'm flying, Jack, I'm flying, and paint me like one of your French girls, and those lines get taken and recycled and reused, and levels of cynicism are lathered on top of them, and then it becomes this thing where it's just like, oh god, what was such cliche lines. And I was worried that it was going to affect my enjoyment, but it didn't, because in the context of the film, they have weight. When she says, it's been 84 years, you feel it. When she's on the front of that ship and she's looking down, she says, I'm flying. You feel it. You feel what that would feel like by the way that the scene is shot, and the way that Kate Winslet reacts to it, and it feels like she's really there doing it. And then, draw me like one of your French girls, that has so much meaning, because she's saying, draw me as you see me. Like, I want you to see me, which will kind of is the theme that will be touched on in Cameron's next film, Avatar. She doesn't want, him to kind of just draw her, just make a good likeness. She wants him to really look at her and create an art piece out of it. So it's not like, oh, draw me like one of your French girls because they're naked. It's like, no, just I want you to see me the way you see them. I want to feel like someone like that, like someone who's lived a life, And just the way that he's delicately drawn her there's a lot in that scene that I think is a lot more complex and layered than, again, meets the eye. Anyway, I'm beleaguering the points of this video so far, so I'll bring this to a close. Oh yeah, and as I was saying, the whole I'm flying scene, some of that is real, and it is stunning. Like, it was one of those things where Cameron was like, holy shit, just grab the camera, we got to do this now, because they had the ship on the shoreline in Mexico in a tank, and you could see the real ocean, and the sky was beautiful. So they filmed some of that when it's all completely real, no digital sky or digital sea, it's all completely real. And then the rest of the sequence they matched to that beautiful lighting, and even the one of the shots in the final film is slightly out of focus, but because it was just so, and the cinematographer was said to Cameron, like, there's no way it's going to happen today. Looking at the clouds, forget about it. But he saw the lights of the sky were perfect for the scene, and Kate Winslet was like, holy shit, let's get going. Like, you're just all scrambling together. They filmed it really quickly, and it's one of the more memorable, iconic looking scenes of the film, and feeling as well. I think that it's nice. If you were on the front of one of those ships looking down, like fucking 40-50 feet, however tall that ship was, down to the water, and it's going at pace through the ocean, and you've got nothing in front of you but the horizon, and it's this beautiful sunset, and you're standing on there with your arms out wide, you would think, fuck, I'm flying, and you'd be exuberant, you'd be exhilarated, and I think it's a great moment. Anyway, I could talk on and on about this film, and I have done in the review that you're about to see in a couple of months, or whenever that video goes up. So I think I've expressed enough how much I love the film, and I think it is underrated. I really do. And the things that I'm really pleased by now, going back to it, is Gloria Stewart's performance, and just how much the film emotionally clicks with me at the end. I just think it's a really touching story, and overrides any kind of qualms people may have over historical inaccuracies or things like that. I think Cameron puts so much attention into the detail of trying to make things as historically accurate as possible. Even the kind of the White Star Line crew member, I don't know if he's an officer or whoever he was, who took the boats back to look for survivors. I think he was the only person who took one of the lifeboats back to kind of see if anyone was still alive in the water. That guy was Welsh in real life, so he got a Welsh actor to play that part. So, that's the level of trying to get things right that he went for, and I think that he mostly achieves that, and just creates this spectacle that for me never feels like it's more about the visuals and kind of the technical achievements of the film than it is more about the characters. And people may disagree with me on that, but I think that it's a real healthy balance, and really does make for, I think, one of my favorite films of all time. And I think I can comfortably say that now, and I wouldn't have a few months ago before I rewatched this film. So it's the great thing about movies, that they always change, and as you grow, they grow with you, and you see different things in them, and you react to them differently sometimes. Sometimes it's always the same, but in a film like Titanic, I think it has that texture and quality to it that it does for me. It feels better as it goes on, which is something I was a little bit worried that it wouldn't. I was worried that it wouldn't age nicely in my own mind, but it held up like a motherfucker. Let's say that. So I'm going to leave it there for Titanic. I've now at this point waffled on for almost an hour and a half collectively over this video and the previous one. So we'll now comfortably leave Titanic where she lies, and move ahead next, not with his next film, but with what Cameron decided to do next after Titanic, because it wasn't all as cut and dry as you might think, and he kind of took his life and career in a different direction. So look forward to that. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.